Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Curated Caregiver. And I am Donna Jackson, the adult caregivers coach. And today I am here with Marie Smith, Special Agent Marie Smith of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations, Financial Crime and Investigations Unit. You guys, we are in for a real education, a real look behind the curtain in what we'll be discussing. This is going to be a two-part series on financial crimes against older adults and how this manifests in the caregiving space. So with that, Marie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I want you to just go ahead, like kick us off with, what the day in the life of a special agent of the SBI looks like as it relates to this topic we're discussing today.
Yeah, so honestly, there is no day in the life. There is, every day is different. Every day can be completely unexpected. And, every day is totally different. We investigate a lot of different financial crimes here at the SBI in our unit. But unfortunately, a lot of us at any given moment has a financial crime against an older adult. That's a typical case that we work. We work run-of-the-mill embezzlements with small businesses or frauds, but we do also a lot of financial exploitation against older adults. So I often find myself working those types of cases. They're near and dear to my heart, and they're something that I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm excited to be talking to you about them today.
Yeah, wow. So tell us about, even any case studies, anything that you've seen in this space, you know, um, and the impact that it has at this stage in life. I mean, a lot of times if people are scammed or they are impacted by a financial mishap earlier in life, there's time to recoup and recover and things like that. But talk to us about what this looks like, the devastation that happens. And more than that, if there's any way we can avoid this or, look out for it and know what to look for.
Yeah, definitely. So, in North Carolina, we consider an older adult 65, which quite frankly is not old at all. As the baby boomers begin to age, it's quite evident that they're living a lot longer than generations previous. And so, age 65 is really young. There's a lot of life ahead of people who are 65 and older. And so, specifically as the baby boomers age, we're going to see a lot more older adults here in the United States. And I think that we'll start to see a lot more financial crimes against older adults. There's a lot of generational wealth, specifically with the baby boomers, that's being passed along. And so there's more to steal, really. One of the things that we often see with older adults, specifically as it relates to caregiver fraud, is that there is a trusted family member, friend, or maybe a caregiver, such as a home health aide or someone who's been hired in to help caregive or to help give care to the older adult. That person has a lot of ability and opening really to take advantage of older adults when they are a trusted person. I think that's the key. As we age, we often require other people to help care for us, and we have to be vulnerable in order to have care, and that can open us up to financial exploitation, unfortunately. So a lot of the cases that we see that are exploitation of an older adult involve maybe a child who is taking advantage of a parent, maybe a home health care agent, a home health care aide, or some sort of nurse or worker that comes into the older adult's home, maybe a power of attorney, someone who they have hired or placed into their estate planning documents to help care for them from a financial standpoint that could also be taking advantage of them. So there's really a lot of opportunity for a trusted person to take advantage of an older adult. I think one of the more difficult cases that we work involves when children steal from their parents or when a family member steal from their parents. I often, when I speak to groups of older adults about how to avoid financial exploitation, we talk about, who's on your bank account? Who have you allowed to have access to your finances? And I often joke that many of us have one child who is a knucklehead. And that is not the person who you want on your bank account. Don't let the knucklehead be the signer on your bank account if you can help it. Try to find somebody other than the knucklehead to be the signer on your account. But oftentimes that's what we see. We may see a child who has an addiction problem, a gambling problem, maybe just a shopping problem. They may just be living above their means, or maybe they're under the impression that, well, when mom dies, I'm going to get it anyway, so why not take it now? And that's a problem. That's a huge problem because, mom is relying on that money to age gracefully, age in her home, age in a decent facility. And when that money is taken before the older adult ever gets to use it or ever really needs to use it, that's a big problem for them. And like you said, it takes a while to recover from that. So when an older adult has a large loss, we're seeing them either not be able to afford the type of care that they need or want. We're seeing them have to go back to work. They've maybe lost all their retirement. They have no savings left. What happens if you don't have your savings anymore and you suddenly have a roof leak? You don't have the money to pay for it. So it's not just about their care from a medical or healthcare perspective. It's also about their care from a living standard, and having the finances to be able to live. So it is really difficult for them to recover. There are a lot of cases that we work where maybe the older adult has unfortunately already passed away. And that is also a challenge for us when, we're trying to figure out what was a caregiver or a family member supposed to do or not supposed to do as it relates to finances. What did they have permission to do? What were the conversations that had taken place before the older adult died? And, we don't have an older adult to interview. We don't have that victim to interview anymore. And that creates a difficulty for us. So for us, these financial crimes against older adults, a lot of it's about finding it early, finding it quickly, and really just preventing it in the first place. I think education is key, and hopefully we can do some of that today.
Yeah. No, this is good. It's really easy to say, you older adults, the elderly population. I know that might be a word that a lot of people don't want to hear, elderly, or feel that they are elderly, right? But when you're getting up there in your late 80s and 90s and things like that, it's really easy for people to say to them, hey, you gotta guard against this. You have to fend off, even the child that is irresponsible. You've raised this child, your children, if you have more than one, and who is the more reliable, responsible, all those things. It's very easy to say, hey, 90-year-old, make sure you put these things in the right hands in your family. But practically, how do you all have any types of lessons learned where you can say, this happened, and here are some ways to combat or to, get in front of that scenario happening again? Because to me, that the practicality of giving people sound kind of guidance on what to do and what not to do is super helpful because, Marie, one thing that is common across all of the families we're talking about are complex relationships. And so it could be that child who has an addiction, the mother does not love that child any less. That's still their child, and they still have hope. They still want the best for the child. So they almost do this almost to say, I trust you, even though they, in their heart of hearts, they don't trust them, but they want to show that I haven't given up on you. So I'm going to kind of put this in your hands. So do you guys capture any lessons learned that we can pass along?
Yeah, so I'll actually just give you a brief case study that I think is a great example of both family being caregiver and also having a caregiver from outside the home. This is a case from many years ago, and we had a doctor, retired doctor. He was getting up in years. He was starting to have some medical issues, and he required some caregiving. So he had a caregiver that they had hired through an agency. He had two sons who loved him dearly and cared a lot about him. They had his best interest in heart. Maybe one of them was a knucklehead, but I couldn't tell you which one it was. But they both seemed to really care about their dad. Dad really enjoyed this specific caregiver from this agency. And so they asked her, could we hire you away from your agency and would you come work for us privately? So that's what she did. She agreed to do that. So she was his sole caregiver. The kids, of course, were in the picture. They were around. They were checking up on dad. They were, coming to visit. It wasn't that typical case where he's completely alienated, but he did have family around. And as his eyesight started to worsen, he said, I need some help paying my bills, which is a very typical thing that happens for older adults. I can't see that tiny little line on the checkbook, or I have arthritis in my hand and it's really hard for me to hold this pen. So he asked his caregiver, can you help me pay my bills? Can you help me balance my checkbook? And his kids were not happy about that. His kids were like, Dad, that is not a good idea. We don't know this lady. That's a mistake. We're making a big mistake. And so as a family, they decided, okay, how about if she gets the statement, the bank statement, she balances my checkbook, she pays my bills, she writes my checks, helps me, pay whatever I need to pay. And then she's going to mail you the bank statement so that you can look at it and you can see that everything's okay. Well, on the surface, that sounds okay, right? They saw that their dad was spending a little bit more money than he had before, but they didn't really think a lot of it because he had this full-time caregiver. She was taking him to the grocery store. She took him out to eat dinner, which was not something he was doing very often before that. He really loved birds, so she would take him to the wild bird store and he would get his bird seeds and his bird feeders and all the things that he could sit in his yard and enjoy nature. So she was taking him out a little bit more. So they thought that increase in spending was probably related to the fact that she was providing him excellent care. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward a couple of years and dad dies of natural causes, whatever medical reason. This is not a homicide investigation. Dad passes away. And as part of the estate proceedings, the kids start getting bank statements from the bank. And they're like, where's dad's CDs? Where's his investment account? I thought he had a lot more money than this. Where is all this? They start asking questions. They start getting bank statements directly from the bank. And what they realized is that this caregiver had manipulated the bank statements, some old-fashioned cut and paste with tape and copiers, and had been providing them falsified bank statements. So they see, sure, the spending is increased, but it looks okay because dad's at the wild bird store and at the local grocery store. But when they get the real bank statement from the bank, they see that she's gone to Myrtle Beach on a vacation. She's getting her nails done. She's going to the movies with her family. She's eating out in places that are not anywhere close to where dad actually lived. She's eating out in her hometown as opposed to his hometown. And so all of this was happening right under their nose when they thought they had the right control in place. They
Mm.
thought that by getting that bank statement that they would know for sure what was happening, where the step that they did wrong was getting it from her. They should have gotten it directly from the bank, or they should have
Right.
had online banking access. So essentially, this lady used his checking account. She emptied out his CDs and she emptied out his investment accounts. She dumped the CDs and the investment accounts into his checking account, and then she spent that money. And in 2 years, she stole over $300,000 from this man. And it wasn't uncovered until he was already dead. He had already died. So I think that's a good example of a typical case for us. That's a
Mhm.
typical elder financial exploitation case that we would work. It's got a lot of the elements that we see, which is there's a caregiver, they are trusted, they increase in responsibility. So it's not just you're here helping me get in the shower, or you're here helping do my laundry or cook my meals, or make sure I make it to my doctor's appointment on time. But now we've crossed over into you're helping me pay my bills,
Yeah.
you're balancing my checkbook, you have access to my finances, you're a signer on my bank account. So that shift from
Mm.
just caregiving to now financial charge, really she's a fiduciary at this point.
Mhm. Mhm.
That shift creates some vulnerabilities there, and that's what happened in this case.
Wow. Yeah, that is so unfortunate and a perfect example of thinking you have some controls in place, you know? Um, wow. And it also shows how it really doesn't matter who the person is, because like we talk about, it could be a family member who's doing this very thing.
Yep.
A very trusted person who's close to the family, or it could be like this, a health aide, a healthcare aide, someone outside of the family. So, from your lens, are there, and I'm going to ask this question, but I'm almost expecting the answer, but is there a way to maybe do some sort of assessment of people before you put them in these fiduciary positions over, an elderly loved one's, finances like this, whether it's a family member or not?
Right. Yeah, I think a background check is always a good thing, right? So you would hope that a background check was done on this specific case. You would hope that a background check was done at the home health care agency that this lady previously worked for. However, a background check is only going to show what somebody's been caught for, what somebody's been caught doing before. And you also have to consider that, um, you know, maybe somebody has stolen from an older adult before and they didn't get caught, or they didn't get charged with it. They didn't get prosecuted for
Mhm.
whatever reason. Oftentimes, that reason is because the caregiver might have already passed away, and maybe law enforcement doesn't feel like we can, really do anything about it with
Mhm.
the evidence that we have. Or maybe they chose just to walk away. The family said, okay, this happened, this caregiver stole from dad, but we're gonna just cut our loss here and move
Mhm.
on. We're grieving, or whatever it happens to be, or we're just in the day-to-day nitty-gritty of taking care of an older adult, and we don't have the time to deal with the court system and law enforcement and an investigation. So you have to remember that a background check is not the end all be all. You also have to remember that, there's a fraud triangle, and typically people who are committing fraud, they have a pressure, they have an opportunity, and they somehow rationalize it. So pressures change. What your pressure is today may not exist tomorrow, or maybe you have no pressure today and tomorrow you're faced with an unforeseen medical bill or an unforeseen
Mm.
expense for your children, or whatever it happens to be. And so they have that pressure, they find an opportunity, and they somehow rationalize it. Oftentimes we see that as, well, I'm not being paid enough to take care of this crotchety old lady, or this is my mom and I'm owed this money. I'm taking care of her and I'm owed this money, or I'm the only child. I'm going to get this money one day anyways. So I should be able to spend it now while, I'm young. Or so there's some sort of rationalization that's created. And at the end of the day, the love of money is the root of all evil, and people are greedy. And so when all of those things come together, you have a perfect storm, and you have people that steal. So I would say that the best thing for adults to do is to plan for their financial future. And that involves choosing your co-signers wisely. Don't choose the knucklehead. Don't put the knucklehead on your bank account. Make sure that your estate is set up and ready to go. I can't offer a lot of legal advice, but one of the things that we see and that we deal with in our cases is an overly broad power of attorney agreement. So let's say I just go on, online, and I just Google power of attorney agreement. I find whatever's out there on whatever legal website I find, and I download that, I sign it, get it notarized, whatever. And this is the document that my life is going to be based off of. My financial future is going to be based off of. And if I haven't read that document, or I don't understand what that document says, I may have some agreements in that power of attorney agreement that I don't necessarily realize could be a license to steal. One of the things that we see in a lot of these very generic, I'm going to say POA, power of attorney, POA agreements, is a overly broad gift clause. So that might look like something that says, I, Marie, give Donna power of attorney over me. She can handle all of my finances. As power of attorney, she has the ability to give herself a gift of any size at any time for any reason. And do you see where that could be a problem? So if you're my power of attorney and you decide, well, I'm going to give myself a gift of a new Lexus, that's fantastic for you, Donna, but maybe not so much for me. And so, that makes it difficult. You add in that maybe our older adult has already passed away. I can't sit down and have a conversation with my victim and say, did you intend for Donna to have a Lexus? I can't ask those questions. So an overly broad power of attorney agreement can be a real problem for these types of cases. So in planning for your financial future, you have to make sure that you're making wise decisions, that your account holder, your account signers are the right people, your power of attorney is the right person. I would say in general, just don't sign documents that you don't understand. We see cases where maybe a child or even just a caregiver, maybe a next door neighbor, or some other family member might come in and say, hey, grandma, sign this deed. And suddenly they've signed their house over, and they don't even realize that they've signed their house over, either because there's some sort of cognitive disability, or they just don't understand the document that they're signing. And the person standing in front of them saying, sign this document, is somebody they trust, somebody that they believe has their best interest at heart. And unfortunately, that's not always true. So just don't sign documents that you don't understand. One of the other things that I would say is a good practice for older adults is a lot of the banks, and specifically the credit unions now, allow a trusted contact person on the bank account. So that's not going to give the ability to write checks, use the debit card, or withdraw money, but it is going to give the bank an additional person that they can contact when they're concerned. So I'll give you an example of how I've seen this work really well. Let's say grandma comes in being pushed in her wheelchair by her home health care aide. And she comes into the bank, and the home health care aide says, we need to withdraw $10,000. And the bank says, well, Grandma, what do you need to withdraw $10,000 for? And home health care aide cuts her off and says, she's getting a new roof. What you see is that the caregiver is not allowing her to speak.
Right.
She's taking complete control of the situation. She might not be a signer on the account and able to withdraw money without Grandma being present. But she is running the show, clearly. And so the bank has two options. They can hand over that money, or they can ask some more questions. And if there's a trusted contact on the account, the bank could potentially call son or daughter and say, hey, your mom was in here today with her home health care aide, and she was trying to take $10,000 out of the bank. The home health care aide told us that she was getting a new roof. If we remember correctly, your mom is living in a townhome. So we didn't think your mom should be paying the bill for the roof. We wanted to verify that with you. So the bank can't tell son or daughter, they came in and they wanted 10 grand. They can't give information about financial transactions because of financial privacy, but they can tell the rest of the story. They can say, your mom came in with a home health care aide. She said she's getting a new roof. We thought she lived in a townhome. Could you clarify that for us? And son or daughter has the opportunity to say, under no circumstance should mom be getting money to pay for a roof. The HOA handles that. The townhome facility pays that bill. Mom doesn't pay for her own roof. So at that point, that trusted contact can step in, A, stop the bank from making the transaction, and B, realize we got a problem. We got a problem and we need to fix it. We have a caregiver that no longer should be here. So that trusted contact can really save an older adult from financial ruin. And that's a scenario where I've seen that play out, and I've seen that work and protect somebody from what would have been financial exploitation.
Wow, that is, yeah, it's so real. As you're talking about it, I can just see it playing out, and I don't even have to see it. It was actually a real situation, and it happens all the time.
All the time.
Do you you talked about how we're living longer now, right? So do you see any connection between why people are targeting the older population, or are these, criminals doing this to just everybody, but it's more because the older population is more vulnerable, we're kind of shining a light on it? Or is it truly that they are targeting the older population?
I'd say both. I'd say, when it comes to like a home health care aide, sometimes we see that they are we would call them serial embezzlers. They are constantly stealing from whoever they care for, whether that's stealing jewelry or stealing money from a bank account. This happens everywhere they go. They hop from agency to agency to agency, and maybe the next agency doesn't do a background check, or the charges they just got charged for haven't shown up yet, or they didn't get prosecuted prior to the home health care aid new agency doing a background check, whatever it happens to be. Things can fall through the cracks. That happens all the time, unfortunately. And so, yeah, we do see people who come across our desk over and over and over again, but we also see people who have never committed a crime in their entire life. They have no criminal history. They've never done anything like this. And like I said, they have a pressure, they see an opportunity, and they rationalize it. Maybe they rationalize it by saying, I'm just going to borrow from the victim and I'm going to pay her back, or I'm going to take some cash out of her wallet and stick it back in. Most financial crimes typically start small and they ramp up. We don't often see, somebody hitting somebody for $1 million immediately. Usually it kind of starts small. But so I'd say it's a mixture. It's a mixture of people who do this all the time, and it's a mixture of people who have never done this before. And So there's not really a rhyme or reason to who our perpetrators are.
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many different types of this or crimes against the older people going on, whether it is a family member, a trusted person, or a stranger, right? Um, I'm going to just list a few areas where this is pretty prevalent, and let me know if you can give examples of what you guys have seen in these spaces, in any of them, and um, again, if there's anything we can do to combat it, because it feels like one of those catch-22 situations, right? I'm thinking about the older person and a caregiver or a trusted person with them, just like we would think of a child in daycare. You're literally, you in some instances you could potentially be sending your precious loved one into the arms of the
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 devil.
evil, the evil one.
Yes.
Yes. It's just, how do you combat it? I mean, we with technology, I know we can use cameras and those types of things, but then there's that expense. There are those types of things. So before I list this off, I want you to just tell me any solutions that I really want our listening audience to maybe potentially take away. And you've given some great ways to look for this and to kind of manage it. How do we solution for it? And I know that's the $8 million question. How do we solve for this?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the common things that we see is the isolation of our older adults.
Mhm,
And I think not becoming isolated can be a make or break moment for our older adults in the caregiving space.
mhm,
Um, when an older adult relies fully on a caregiver and there's nobody else overseeing, that could be a problem. No different than a bank manager seeing what their teller's doing at the teller window every day, right? There's an overseer. Somebody needs to have oversight over the older adult. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. So, I have found myself in the sandwich generation. I am raising young children and I have aging parents. My dad has Alzheimer's. My mom at this stage in life is perfectly capable of caring for him. But if that ever changed, I'm a working mom. I have a family of my own. My dad is at a point where I could not bring him into my home and care for him 24/7 and still work my job and still care for my children and be married. I couldn't do that. I don't have that ability at in this season of my life and in the stage that I'm in life. So I would have no choice but to rely on somebody to care for him, whether that be a facility or whether that be somebody who comes into his home. I would have to rely on somebody else to care for him. But the important thing is that I would have to, at that point, become the overseer. I would have to make sure that I'm checking up on, is he being cared for? Is he being fed? Are his clothes being changed? Has he taken a shower? But also in the financial space, who's paying his bills? Is there anything missing from his home? Um, you know, did his deed change? Has his car title changed? Or whatever it happens to be, I have to become the overseer. And when we, as caregivers, specifically for children of older adults or nephews or nieces or whoever might care for an older adult, when we as caregivers let that person become isolated,
mm,
problems can happen.
mhm,
Major problems can happen. So I think one of the main ways to protect yourself and others from financial exploitation is just to look after that older adult. Just check in on them, make
mhm,
more frequent phone calls, make more frequent visits, do the cameras like you talked about. Find a neighbor that can. Do you have a nosy neighbor that can say, I haven't seen your dad leave his house in days? Um, you know, find people, find your village to help you make sure that that older adult is not isolated. So
Yeah.
If you're an older adult and you're listening, my advice to you would be don't isolate yourself. One of the things that I often hear from a lot of our victims, and honestly from my own mom, is I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to bother you with my problem. I didn't want to call you. I know you're busy. And what I say to that victim and what I say to my mom is the exact same thing. You are not a burden to me. You are important to me. You are somebody that I love and that I care about. And whatever is going on in your life is important to me. And so if you're an older adult and you don't have that person in your life, then you need to get out of your house. You need to find a senior center. You need to join a local church. You need to, if you're able, volunteer time at an animal shelter or, somewhere like that, that you can be around other people. Don't become isolated in your home because that allows you to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And so I think that's really a big key, is not letting our older population isolate themselves for whatever reason that is, for whatever reason that happens to be. And sometimes it's just people like to be alone. People just are homebodies. I got my thing going on here. I'm good. I don't need anything. But when you're not communicating with other people, when you've become isolated, you're at risk for someone taking advantage of you, specifically in the caregiver space.
Yeah. Oh, Marie, this is really good. A couple of things I was hearing in what you said there is we need to let our older loved ones know, like, just continue to tell them, call me. I haven't heard from you. I want to hear from you. Or you call them. Like, don't let it just be, on their birthday and the holidays that they hear from you. Bring them into your circle if you're a caregiver, or if you're a child of, an elderly person, or if it's not your mom or dad, but it is a relative, or even if it's a neighbor, you know, um, and I'm thinking about older people who feel like their time has come and gone, and now it's a different world, and everybody is passing them by, and the young people are out there, the whippersnappers, all those things. It's probably super helpful when you can to get into, if you can move into one of the senior communities. So it's not assisted living. You have your own home and your own, place to live, but you're surrounded by people who are your age and your age group, and you're seeing them do things that you think, oh, I'm too old to do that. And they're out here playing pickleball. We talked about that earlier. They're playing pickleball. They're doing all of these things because, you know, 65 isn't the 65 of our grandmothers. It's not.
It's not.
It's just not anymore. And so, the finances play a big part in that even being an option for a lot of people. And we know that. And it's just so unfortunate. But if you can plan, and that's really the name of the game, is plan for this. Because if you continue to live, you're going to come to this stage, you're going to come to this season. And how much more you'll be able to enjoy it if you have planned for this, as opposed to it's just, I'm just here, I just arrived, and now what? Right? Oh my gosh. Such really good information. This is one of the things when we think about the SBI, especially when I think about let me say, when I think about the SBI, I'm so used to seeing um, the um, the shows, the TV shows, and the law shows and criminal shows, and the SBI comes in and they're doing forensics over, murder cases and things like that. Do you guys have forensics, if you will, in this space? And what does that look like? Is it more of what you basically have said, or is there something that you're really delving into in terms of the forensic science of it all?
Yeah, I would say our version of forensics is the analyzing of bank statements and financial accounts and, putting those things into spreadsheets and looking at trends and how do things change from one year to the next. Like I talked about in the case of the crafty caretaker who, falsified the bank statements. Um,
Mhm.
his spending changed from one year to the next. So looking at some of those trends, analyzing things, analyzing what location transactions took place in, what days transactions took place on. Maybe it's normal for the caretaker to go spend a ton of money at Walmart on a Wednesday when she's on shift, but she probably shouldn't have his card on the weekend at Walmart when she's not on shift. So I would say our version of forensics is more of data analytics and analyzing how a financial account changes or what takes place in financial accounts. So that would be our version of forensics. And I can also guarantee you that things don't happen in 45 minutes at any law enforcement agency when it comes to investigating crimes. That would be great if we could get through things in 45 minutes, but like Law and Order.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello. Exactly. So I hear patterns and pathology. That's what I'm hearing, that you're looking for that. And we as, lay people not in your space can follow that guide as well.
Yeah.
Patterns, look for patterns of behaviors, shifts in changing of behavior, the pathology, what is going on that you can track, and now you see a shift or a change.
Yeah.
As we begin to wrap, let me go back to the list I wanted to kind of shout out there. And out of any of these, just fill in any anecdotal things you would like for any of these categories. So, we see different types of scams to the our older generation. Romance scams, tech support, right? Grandparent scam. I remember that being in the news. Government impersonation, or lottery scams. Someone comes to the door with a home repair. And then we've talked a lot about family and caregiving scams. So out of the rest of those, anything that jumps out at you in terms of even that elderly person who is isolated and they're looking for love. They're 85, looking for love on the internet, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Anything?
Yeah, I would say that really like that list that you gave, I would categorize the first, 5 or 6 things as one type of financial exploitation. So all those scams, that romance scam, government impersonators, the lottery scam, the home repair scam, the um, all
Yeah.
the things, all those
Yeah.
scam types things are one type of financial crime, whereas the caregiver crime is something in my opinion is totally different, because oftentimes those scams, whether it's a home repair scam by somebody knocking on your door or a scam because somebody met you on the internet, those types of scams are not, those are stranger scams, those are stranger crimes, those are not people that those are not people that you've met before, despite the fact that you think you're video chatting with somebody.
Mhm.
Those are stranger scams, whereas a caregiver or a family member scam is very personal. It's, um,
Mm.
you know, this is somebody that you trust. This is somebody that you would put your life on the line for. Oftentimes, when we're talking about our children, scam or exploiting their parents. This is somebody that you trust or that you would put your life on the line for. Oftentimes that trust is a two-way street in those relationships. And when you're an older adult and you have a caregiver, you have to place your trust in a caregiver because you have no ability to do whatever medical issue that you have, whatever disability you might have. You have no ability to do that on your own, and you have to put your trust in somebody else. Whereas the scam side of things, those are strangers. Those are people you've never met. Those are people that don't know you from Adam, and you build a trust with those people and end up being scammed. Whereas on the other side, the trust was already there. So I would say those are kind of two different things. And I think we may be talking about the scam side of things at another date, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're definitely bringing you back.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I love how you categorize those. That is, man, it just makes you think of how wicked the personal scammer who is your caregiver is, especially if it's a family member.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is not everybody who comes to this season is wired in the right way to be responsible in that season.
Yeah.
So just because it's like, tag, you're it because you're the only child. This might not be your thing. This might not be what you do well. But what I heard you say earlier is you can, look within yourself. I'm paraphrasing. You didn't say this, but this is what I heard. You can look within yourself and you can determine, I might not be the right person to do this. And so I'm going to be responsible, and I'm going to truly be a fiduciary and put that responsibility in the hands of a professional person or a trusted person who can do this, having the best interest of my elderly parent, grandparent, or a loved one in mind. And I'm going to step aside and I'll be the overseer.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be in the mix because my heart isn't right. Now, you have to be real mature, and your emotional intelligence has to be super high and aware to do that. But we're hoping that these podcasts that we're bringing you experts in this space of caregiving for an elderly loved one, to shine the light, to get you guys thinking about things that need to be put in place for this very season that Marie has been talking about. So Marie, any closing remarks, anything you want to tell us? And you also teed it up. Tell us about what we're going to be talking about next time.
Yeah. So I think next time we're going to talk about scams against older adults, whether that is a scam online, a scam on the phone. And we're going to talk specifically about something called money mules and how grandma can become a money mule and what might could happen to grandma if that's the path that she chooses. And so we're going to talk about scams. We're going to talk about how we combat those things, the red flags that we see, and just what can be done to try to protect older adults from scams.
Well, that sounds great. We are looking forward to part 2 of this really, really helpful session. Guys, check out the SBI's website if you get a chance, and just see all of the amazing things that they are doing, how they are out there trying to protect our interest across the spectrum of things, right? It's not just this, but and how you can even get involved when they have events and they're trying to educate the community on what they do and how they support us. So be sure to do that. We'll drop a link in the for you on the page for you to click on and look more into it. But until then, Marie, thank you so much. We're looking forward to having you back. And you guys stay tuned.
For having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. You guys stay tuned. Bye now.
Bye.